part of the online collections technology think tank. For those who've just joined our event, you've missed a couple of or three really good discussions this morning. So they're being recorded, so you can feel free to have a look back at those at some point. And yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy this session as well, which will discuss business transformation. Before I kick off, I'd like to just highlight the fact that you've got a screen in front of you that's not just a video. On the left, you can interact. So have a look at the event information. That's the top button on the left-hand side. You've also got the important speech bubble there. That's for asking questions. We definitely want you involved. So ask questions as often as you can using that as well. We will try and cover them off. If we don't, we'll try and make sure that they're included in our review. On that note, for the review, that will be published next Thursday on the Credit Connect site, but also we're running we're not in this session, but we've run a little poll at the end of this one just to get feedback on this session. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on that as well. Speaker information, have a look at that. It's got information on all of our speakers, their background, etc. And then also we've got a section which is downloads. You can get some information that kind of supports this subject and also our future events, which we're excited to share with you. So we'll talk about them at the end. For this session, I'm going to be chairing it. I'm stepping in from the shoes of Vanessa Northam from StepChange, who's unable to attend this session. She's not been very well today, battling a bit of illness. So I'm going to take over her responsibility for the chairing. And my first part in doing that is that I need to introduce our panel today. So I would like to start by, they're going to give a brief introduction, and if they can also give us a bit of thoughts on the pandemic and what it's brought to them as a business in terms of collections and their experiences, really briefly, that would be really good. So I'll kick off with Mehmet from Ceverine. Hopefully I've said this name right. And Mehmet, if you could just give us a brief introduction, please, that'd be great.
Yes, of course, Cohen. So I'm the CEO and founder of Ceverine, a next-generation digital debt collection service business, which we set up about a year ago. And before Ceverine, I've been in corporate finance for about 20 years, having worked at different institutions internationally, from a Wall Street bank to boutique corporate finance businesses in London and in Turkey, and for about 5-6 years as in my career as a corporate finance advisor, I've worked predominantly with financial services companies, banks, as well as debt purchasers and debt managers in Europe, and that's how I got connected to debt management in the UK, and then set up Ceverine as a result of spotting certain inefficiencies in the market.
Brilliant. Okay, and Adam, we've got Adam from Phillips and Cohen, Adam Simpson. Adam, if you could just introduce us and what you do at Phillips and Cohen, that'd be great.
Of course. Thank you, Colin, and afternoon, everybody. Yeah, so my name's Adam Simpson, and I work for Phillips and Cohen as a global head of digital communication strategy. My experience prior to that, I've had around 20 years within the credit risk management and collections sector, largely specialising in collections, worked across different product sets within financial services, also a bit of public sector and utilities. And then prior to joining Phillips and Cohen earlier on this year, I was a lead consultant working in collections, so working right across different sectors as well. At Phillips and Cohen, it's a relatively new role. I'm sure we'll get into that as well, given that we're talking about digital transformation. So my role is very much around setting and driving the digital agenda for Phillips and Cohen. For those who don't know who Phillips and Cohen are, so we're the specialists in debt recovery services, which include deceased account management and also account purchase. We've got operations globally, so US, Canada, UK, Spain, Portugal, to name a few, also over in Australia. And my role is really responsible, as I say, for the digital comms strategy and also driving the innovation, so looking at new technologies, very much around transformation, driving more effectiveness, and also monitoring existing performance and really drive continuous improvement plan for digital. We'll talk a bit about that later. Our focus very much around migrating some of our traditional approaches more to online and mobile.
Brilliant.
Colin?
Fantastic. Thanks, Adam. And John Storrie from Arvato, if you could give us your intro.
Thank you, Colin, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Storrie. I am Operations and Strategy Director for the UK division of Arvato Financial Solutions. We are a global entity, but mainly based in Europe, and our focus in the UK is predominantly on contingent collections, field services, also outsourced white-labelled collections on behalf of many of our clients. Through the last 16 years with the business, I've seen many changes, particularly in the last 18 months, and I'm very excited today to have the opportunity to talk about some of those transformations, really, get feedback and discuss the options with our peers on this call, and talk about the impact it's had and how everyone thinks we're going to move forward. But I think if there's ever been a time for change and the opportunity for transformation, it's certainly now.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. And Kevin Steele from DEMSA, if you could give us your background, please. Really interested in mix. Thank you.
Hi, Colin. Hi, everybody. So probably I'm longest serving in this, 36 years in the credit industry, starting with UAPT Infolink before becoming European Strategic Development Director of Equifax, and then European Director of Interim Justitia based in Amsterdam, looking after 22 countries, before coming into setting up my own business, having a .com business in the early 2000s, and then working with a number of firms over the years, getting involved in setting up Lowell Group in 2004, and worked with many of the debt purchasers with mergers, acquisitions, activities, strategic development, and moving more and more into the FCA compliance space, really from 2014 into the trade body work, where I'm Chief Executive of the Debt Managers Standards Association, helping many of our members get through the application process. But probably more interestingly for today, spent the last 2 years working with HMRC on a mammoth transformation program, which is all about digital engagement, impacting all of the agents across the whole of HMRC and to some extent another all taxpayers. And that's been pretty eye-opening for me. First big project in the public sector. And also, I think in the context of some of your questions, Colin, pretty relevant in terms of how the pandemic hit, where we went from being the UK's largest tax collector to suddenly having to implement systems in a matter of weeks to pay out 12 million individuals or small businesses, which was pretty interesting in terms of how that had to be mobilised.
Excellent. Okay, that's brilliant. That's a great panel. So I was going to open up with just a real simple one. It's quite broad though. But what objective does digital business transformation serve? I don't know who would like to kick off with that. Adam, are you good for that one?
Yes, I'm happy to take it on. I mean, what I'll do first, Colin, is just lead on from, in terms of what the pandemic has actually given as well. That's what expedited probably a lot of the plans that organisations probably already had in play. I know I, for one, quite a few years ago was actually leading the digital strategy when I was working in utilities, really talking about, I coined the phrase next generation debtors at the time there, which people found quite amusing. But, you fast forward nearly 10 years and we're actually kind of talking about that now when we're thinking about digital. And aside from some of the practical changes that the pandemic has led, from spoken on some of the sessions this morning, from just getting people with kit operational wise and getting people set up at home, thinking about the compliance around data and systems and all that kind of stuff. We really have to think about what that also means for consumers. So we've seen a real shift, almost a forced shift quite quickly, where people have started to engage online. So whether it's through, their online banking, whether it's any other services that they have, those traditional methods have kind of been driven quite quickly online. And I think what transformation it does, it helps us prepare for some of those instances. So not necessarily the pandemic, but having those plans in place where we're constantly continuing to improve and meet those changing expectations of the consumers, but also the people working, for those organisations as well, in terms of what does it look and feel like to work, and being able to use latest developments in technology. And for me, I spent a lot of time, in a consultancy role prior to Phillips and Cohen, and some of the work that we're doing here at Phillips and Cohen as well, thinking about transformation and what it means for us. We talk a lot about technology in the sessions today and similar events, but actually for me, I like to think about how that all links together with other areas. So what people, processes, the control, the customer as well. So for us, it's about that, and also making sure that we're continue to develop and measure the right outcomes as well. So we see that outcomes are changing as well as we look to transform our business. In this case, this conversation around digital. I'll leave it there for a moment to let some of the other guys come in. But I think that's some of the key things that we think about at Phillips and Cohen when we're talking about digital transformation. There's 5 key areas, and what are those right outcomes? And importantly, for us, given the nature of the work we do, we need to make sure we're doing that sensitively and compassionately. And when we think about transformation in digital and collections, it's very much around that conversational approach as well, rather than, if you like, the older traditional methods, which is probably a bit more binary. I think the world is changing, expectations are changing. Maybe that's kind of what the transformation roadmap looks like.
Okay, and John, it'd be good to get your view.
Yeah, certainly for me, in terms of transformation, everyone's got a role to play, and a lot of time we focus on self-service, which certainly has a role to play, and a lot of the customer-facing changes we make. If we're kind of reflecting on the changes in the industry, I think actually we need to reflect on the fact that the entire industry has changed, and the actual service we provide in collections is no longer the same service as 10 years ago. We're not here just to collect money anymore, and to reflect on what you just said there. We are here now to reach the right customer outcome, and that right outcome isn't always necessarily getting a payment when we're on those calls now. So certainly what we're finding, and particularly off the back of the pandemic, you're seeing a lot of new customers now enter debt that have not been there before, potentially. We're focused on making sure that the customers understand that we are genuinely here to help, and trying to change the perception of what a debt collector is. And with that, there's a lot more responsibility on our frontline agents, in terms of exactly what we expect them to do, from be it affordability assessments or vulnerability triggers, and therefore how to deal with that. There's a lot of complex conversations that are now happening in the front line, and that certainly for me, we've seen a drive and an increase of things like average handle time. So for us, a lot of the focus on transformation is actually in our back office opportunities, and so when we traditionally talk about digital transformation, I find a lot of time it's focused on the customer facing stuff. But for DCAs, if you contemplate that the vast majority of out there still have a very high percentage of their staff in back office roles, the real challenge and opportunity for me is if we can drive a lot of automation and a lot of transformation in those back office services, you can free up more cash effectively to fund your frontline services, and that increase you're going to likely need there over the coming years. So things like robotic process automation have been absolutely vital in our business in terms of our transformation, and taking away those repetitive and mundane processes, that the guys have been doing over the years, and really pivoting and moving those staff into more customer facing roles.
Great. Thanks, John. And Mehmet, would you have a view on this? It'd be great to get it.
Well, Cohen, I have a very simplistic view about digital transformation collections. I think it's sort of, you can summarize everything under 2 headings. One is efficiency. That includes, cost savings, improvement in engagements, improvement in recovery of the collections, operational simplicity or reduction of complexity, if you will. So those are all under the efficiency heading, and then actually maybe above all this is the customer intimacy, right? Understanding your customer better through use of data, modeling, cognitive tools like AI and machine learning, and sort of have the right formula or mix of technology that delivers the best with these two headings, right? So best efficiency gains and best sort of intimacy with your customers. So I think every company or a service provider needs to strive to find the right formula that delivers these, the best under these two headings.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin?
Yeah, I'll reflect on this first. I think from the debt advice sector, I mean, 2016, the FCA really had a push on the whole of our sector about engagement, particularly around doing reviews on pre-existing debt solutions. And this really forced most of the firms in those days to rethink their whole approach, which included their digital strategy. So customer portals, use of WhatsApp, integrated mixed customer journeys became absolutely vital, and doing much the same as I suspect our collections colleagues were doing, trying to separate between the people that wanted to fully engage, partially engage, not engage. But with the added part to this, that the FCA were basically saying you needed to jettison customers who didn't participate. And that saw a lot of people returning to collections at that time, which was very disappointing despite the lobbies we made with the regulator. And I think that realization now, 5 years on, that you have to find the right blend and that some people don't actually act in their own best interest means that you've got to come up with a lot of behavioral psychology aligned with the technology that enables this to build these mixed journeys that said, right, you are going to get people fully participating in open banking. They are going to get their credit report, but there are others there that are only going to do the bare minimum, and you needed to find the right strategy. And the top tip I had very early days with things like WhatsApp was if somebody engages very quickly, maintain that pace with that individual so that you work at the same pace, which meant all of your agents, your advisors needed to understand the psychology involved. They needed to be up for a number of things that Andrew talked about beforehand, that they understood some of these technologies, encouraged people to use it. Flip side of something found recently with something like HMRC is where something's been imposed, like in the business sector, making tax digital, where you have to have, a government gateway account, the take-up is enormous, but they've got a big cudgel to use. Contrast that with personal tax accounts. There are an immense number of people with a personal tax account, but they don't use it to self-serve at the moment. So I think trying to find the right carrot and stick in this is also very important, because we've seen evolution in technology. It used to be the case in the debt advice world that somebody'd often have the best iPhone around, but they didn't have any surplus income at all. But you wanted to engage with that M technology. Don't assume because they had no money that they weren't tech enabled, because actually it was often the opposite of that, even with some of the older generation customers that we had. So I think that behavioral science is crucial, that sits alongside a lot of this, and understanding what your firm's strategic objectives are. Is digital transformation something that's been imposed on you, or are you a pioneer and trying to stay ahead of the game where you have that ability to be mobile? But there's a lot of bricks and mortar firms out there that are having to do it, but they've got a lot of legacy that they need to deal with first.
Brilliant. Okay, and I guess on that point, it'd be good to go back to you, and Kevin, on that view, and the focus on service and technology when going through the business change, and how that might be impacted.
I mean, to me, service is critical here. Technology is an enabler in many instances. We still see too many instances where you've got a solution trying to find a problem. And the other factor within a lot of the things I see is the subject around business readiness, engaging all your stakeholders first, understanding what the prize is and what you're trying to achieve to get the right mindset in play is absolutely crucial. But fundamentally, you can have the best tool in the box in the world, but if it doesn't deliver when you actually put it out there, and one of the guys on this call's already mentioned robotics. go off and do some desktop robotics without actually having won the hearts and minds of your agents over, and you're doomed. So crucial to this is understanding what you're trying to achieve. Make sure the thing works at the speed you want it to do. So most of the people here are used to working with big call centers. Meeting Ofcom compliance requirements, silent calls, drop calls is vital. But if you end up doing something that runs like a sick pig, you lose everybody's minds, particularly your customers, but also then the agents that are using it lose confidence. So to me, service delivery, fundamental. Understand what you want to do. If you want to run at the speed of light, what does it require to run at the speed of light? If you want to run just in time, then there's the cost that comes with that. And I think one of your questions later on is how important is cost? And often if you're going to go for best in breed, then you need to make sure that you actually put the infrastructure in place that supports that.
Yeah, and Adam, especially true for you, I guess.
Yeah,
the nature of your business.
Yeah, just building on what Kevin was saying there, and I've seen it in other organisations before. Having the luxury of working with others before Cohen, but it's too easy to go out and buy the latest shiny piece of tech and kit, and then think about, well, actually, I think you said there, Kevin, we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't necessarily exist. And when we talk about going back to the original question about transformation for us at Phillips and Cohen is thinking about what is that right piece of technology at the right time, and how does it integrate with everything else. Given the nature of the work that we do, and I think I heard it on one of the earlier sessions as well. I think it was the affordability one, Colin. There'll still be a need for some of those traditional methods. So whether it's via voice, or if we do go down the bot route, people will still need to speak to people one way or another. And for us at Phillips and Cohen, it's around how do we integrate some of that technology, the digital technology, but still retaining the option to fall back to some of those traditional methods where it's the right thing to do. And I think one of the dangers that we're very aware of, and haven't seen it before, is that some of this technology is implemented and then the whole journey becomes disjointed. And when we talk about some of these buzzwords and people talk about omni-channel, frictionless engagement and journey, that's great, but what does that really mean? And some of the things that we're really trying to do is make sure that it all hangs together in the right way. And that's why I was mentioning at the start around, yes, it's about technology, but it's also around the people and the processes, and obviously the important piece, the consumer at the heart of it as well. So absolutely, I agree with some of the things that you're saying there, Kevin. We're thinking about that service piece. One of the things that we've worked really hard on, actually, more recently, we've just launched a new proposition, certainly great for our industry, and again, it came from the affordability conversation around having that one and done conversation. So we've developed our platform so that people can now inform creditors just once around the different accounts in the estate, and that's kind of groundbreaking for us in the industry. And I know it's something that in financial services, when we think about affordability and vulnerability, it's something that has been on the agenda for many years, and that's the sort of stuff that we're looking into, and how do we make it right for our consumers at the right time, and really truly putting ourselves in the customer shoes and thinking about what is it that works for them, rather than just thinking about, right, there's this bit of kit there, let's put it in and think about what we do with it later. And I think that for me is true transformation, thinking about it in the right way, and then hanging the right outcomes off the side.
Okay, and John?
Yeah, I think I'd echo exactly what the guys have said there. For me, it's about understanding exactly what benefit whatever you're trying to implement brings to your target end user. It's not just about going after what's new and shiny in terms of the technology that's out there. It's not going after the stuff that's trending. It's really, and we tend to get a lot of benefit in collections, actually, because we can learn and understand from other sectors and other markets what's working well, and then traditionally we can probably take a bit more time to understand how that would actually benefit collections before we take the big dive to implement. One of the things I hate the most is when you're trying to force a solution in, and particularly for customer deflection, and to try and avoid customers routing to your contact centre. I don't know that's a key benefit for self-service, but for me, a fundamental thing we always look at in every choice we make with transformation, new technology getting put in, is its choice. You know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to increase the choice we are making available to our customer base, and we're trying to drive increased engagement, and that's by giving the customer the choice of how they want to engage with us. So be it the self-service solutions that allow them to do some basic level of triage for us to get an understanding of their situation, solutions where, you know, they just want to log in and check their financial statement and where they're at. But it really can't be forced for me, because that really does then actually create more customer detriment than good. And what you might actually find is you're getting a lot of calls into your contact centres complaining about the technology you've tried to implement, which was meant to benefit in the first place.
Okay, great. And Mehmet, your view is a different angle, I guess, to the other guys on this.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm coming from a sort of maximum technology end of things at Ceverine, which we provide as a service. So I guess my message is, companies need to pick their battles, right? So technology is not an easy game. So implementing technology is not easy. If you look at the European banking scenes, the big banks are big junkyards of technology experiments, right? So that's been a big headache for them. You have to have a very clear view as to what you're looking to achieve, and what you want to implement internally, and what you don't want to implement internally because it's not worth it, and maybe outsource it and get it as a service, not bear the technology pains. And so it's a delicate balance. If you're just an accumulator of technology, it's going to become a junkyard. Yeah, for the first question is, it starts with what you're looking to achieve, and can you change your mentality as well? Because overlaying technologies on manual processes, whatever the reason is, it doesn't have to be the mentality alone. It's the regulation sometimes prevents you from automating things to the maximum, or going full digital, and then what you're left with is the analogy I like is the mechanical Turk, right? So people puppeteering the operation, where in the front you think it's high tech, but it's in the back it's very, very manual. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. So it's not an easy question. So each company needs to find their own unique formula and mix what technologies do they want to import, and what services they want to use to get the best outcome on their CRM across the chain.
Okay, I guess on that note, it'd be good to get your view on what you see as the next big challenges for collections operations, because obviously don't think it's strictly a recession, but things are definitely going to tighten in terms of the vulnerability piece, and with furlough, the energy price cap, etc. Have you got a view on that at all? That'd be good to hear about what you think the big challenges you see that you can kind of address, I guess, in some ways as a newer company.
Well, the big challenge today is I think for companies, it's not just the recession view. The recession has been, it's still not there, right? So we don't know. We've heard several economic views about this over the last few months, but for companies, I think, as I said, I'm going to go back, maybe repeat the same message, but it applies here as well, right? So they need to pick their battles and identify what's important for them. So do they need to focus on vulnerability? Do they need to focus on, so what are the areas they need to beef up on? And then sort of decide if these are key areas for them to really spend a lot of money on and implement technologies and spend all the time, because it's not a quick process either, right? So if once you go into an implementation, it can take all the way to 18, 24 months in certain cases to have things perfected internally. But you need to, I guess, have the forward view to create the right platform as a company, so that if you're going to import technologies, import them. If you're going to import services, you need to have the digital platform or the highway from upstream to downstream, so that they can plug into it and make it work. So you need to, I guess, prepare yourself to be able to have that plug and play compatibility as well, because otherwise, if you maintain the same infrastructure and parachute in certain digital capabilities or services or technologies, they're not going to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Kevin, any thoughts on that as well?
Probably a slightly different view on that. Yeah. I mean, I think the things that I've observed is that I think there are a lot of lessons learned coming out of the pandemic, particularly in terms of, in quotes, what is agile. But I have to say there were some firms who behave remarkably, which I would also say are the public sector in terms of being able to do things. But some of that was a bit budget and fix it. And coming out of that now, some of the things that are very key are your costing models. So I'm sure we'll come on to this a little bit later on, the impact of people like AWS in consumption-based pricing, expandability and being able to contract, having huge amounts of flexibility in things like your time to pay, your payment arrangements, being able to do the behavioral science and segment your clients, have mixed journeys. So actually bolting things on doesn't work. So underpinning all of this, unless you've done the data design well, to enable the data analytics and then to be able to join together what often are now a bunch of cloud-based solutions and put the whole framework together, it won't work in the long term, but it ultimately has got to be scalable upwards and downwards so that you can actually look at focusing on some of the areas that you think are your raison d'etre. And if your raison d'etre happens to be dealing with people in the vulnerability space, which is much more my space in debt advice, or those that maybe, in a different segment, but require a different set of engagement tools. But you've got to take heed of the fact now that there are an awful lot of capabilities out there which require good systems integration, good integration frameworks, and understanding what cost model you can work with if you can't afford all of the investment infrastructure. I hear what is being said around big banks who have thrown away a lot of money. Most small and medium-sized enterprises just simply can't afford to do that. So they've got to look at what model will work for them for the next 5 years.
Okay. Adam?
Yeah, I think I'd echo a lot of that, Colin. I think thinking about those next big challenges for organisations, the key one for me, we've seen that shift, certainly material shift in behaviour online. Some of that forced, some by choice, and consumers are beginning to engage with their creditors digitally. I think the key challenge now for me, when I kind of look outward, is how do we keep them engaged in those journeys, rather than reverting back to where we were 2 years ago. And I think a lot of that comes from what Mehmet and Kevin were saying around the technology platforms. It's got to be right. And I think as we're investing in the journeys and making sure they all hang together, that's one thing. But if the technology isn't established in the right way, and as Kevin said, it's not scalable, you're giving people a reason to drop out of that journey and either not engage with you at all or revert back to some of those more unwieldy processes that we're trying to drive away from, or to kind of get more efficiencies and a better experience for people. I think I see that as one of kind of the big transformational challenges, at least. I think the other one around what's going to happen in the market, and Mehmet was kind of citing around what's happening in the economy. I think that's a fair shout. Who knows? We've seen furlough being extended. We've had emergency payment holidays within the financial sector. From a collections point of view, we know that it's probably a bow wave of arrears that probably going to land at some point. Can what we're doing digitally in transforming our organisations, is that going to be enable us to be better prepared for that flow of new consumers coming through? And as somebody mentioned earlier, some people haven't been in arrears before. So how do you kind of engage with those in the right way? If you're no longer having a phone call or even visiting people or going through like a lengthy I&E process, whatever that might look like, how do you kind of engage those in the right way? And I think for me, that probably represents one of the biggest challenge, that true step change in terms of how we operate, right across the industry, regardless of which vertical market we're operating in.
Okay, cool. And John, I guess.
Yeah, so For me, I'd probably expand on some of what Adam's saying. I think this is a very, very unique time in the industry. Never seen anything like it, to be perfectly honest. I know that's pretty obvious with the pandemic, but I think if I go back to April 2020 and what was happening, I think there was a real fear regarding affordability of your existing customer base and how collections were going to perform. But actually, what we've seen over the last 18 months is very strong collections. There's actually been more liquidity out there, more customers with that ready opportunity to make payments, particularly if you look at the financial services and credit card debt. A lot of customers have been moving to try and pay that off. But I think what we're going to see is that's going to potentially change now. And as the guys have been speaking about, it's about being prepared. How are we going to prepare to support these customers? Because we're looking like the changes we've got coming. We all know utilities are going to increase. We've got the 1.25% getting changed on national insurance. Inflation is going to be on the rise. We've got the cuts to universal credit. And if we expand on all of that and we think about our own sector and the challenges we're facing, I don't think we've ever faced such a challenge in terms of the labour shortages that we have, which aren't just unique to our sector. They're across different markets. Talking about 1 million vacancies nationwide. So all of these things are potentially combining for, the perfect storm, but it doesn't have to be. We can be prepared. This is a very good opportunity to drive change in your business. People are far more willing to listen than they've ever been before because that change was forced upon them with the move to home working. So for me, I guess the key message to everyone out there is be prepared. I do think, unfortunately, we are going to see more people get into debt over the coming 6 to 12 months. So it's how can we be prepared to help them? How can we scale up? And I think software as a service is a great opportunity for that. That's something we'd have had trouble with in the past when you're looking at traditional expensive enterprise on-premise solutions. Software as a service is great for flexibility, and it's definitely something we're heavily looking at.
Okay, great. Interesting. I was going to pick up on that note actually and cover costs. So how important is cost and its impact on the effectiveness of operations? Kevin, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come at this from a debt advice sector first of all, because at the moment, as you're probably aware, the Money and Pension Service are doing a series of tenders to the debt advice sector, and with that comes a number of fairly prescriptive costing models, which, as we've probably seen with the statutory debt repayment plans, the FCA say that they shouldn't be setting pricing, but in our sector, they very much are. And you're finding there's going to be a compromise at some point in time, unless you get this digital transformation right, that cost is going to come incredibly important, both in terms of turning fixed costs into variable costs, but looking at what is the right price to service a customer. We've just talked about face-to-face being out of fashion. It's really gone out of the equation to some degree in our space. But you've got to think about that. If you're going to get turned around and said, I can only service a customer at 8% of their disposable income, and ultimately the people that are going to foot the bill will be the creditors through levies and quasi-fair share type contributions, cost is going to become an incredibly important factor in it. And what we in our sector need to be able to do is lobby very strongly to say, actually, some of these models being put forward are not fit for purpose. There's been a lot of criticism of the breathing space in terms of being one size fits all. So the organizations need to become much more sophisticated in their data analytics, look at the cost of servicing different customers and partnering with the right people to say, look, this isn't our sweet spot. We need to be able to work with others, but you may still have the primary relationship with the customer. You may be the front door. So cost to me is enormously important. And being able, as I say, be able to turn fixed cost into variable cost, being able to find money for R&D to look at things. I think I agree with a lot of what John said earlier on, that you're not at the bleeding edge. Often you can see others pioneer in different areas, but you need to be pretty quick behind to look at when you adopt. And to me, one of the big spaces at the moment for that is sentiment analytics and speech analytics, speech to text, particularly with hybrid working. So hybrid working has also, with workforce management type schemes, brought about a whole new way of thinking to say, what does your business model look like going forward? Can I transform it whilst I'm still doing business as usual? So there's a lot going on. How do I fund it? and you say, I can't predict when the tsunami is going to hit, which was an unfortunate situation for StepChange. They implemented a number of quite innovative schemes, but were reliant on fiscal policy with the government, where you then have to go and get the next round of money. So you can't plan over 5 years very effectively. So our sector in particular, financial planning is crucial. Financial resilience, operational resilience, two things the FCA are focusing on for small and medium-sized enterprises, is a real challenge to be able to get enough R&D into what we're doing to be able to anticipate this tsunami that we don't think probably will be in the next quarter, and we will still see forbearance measures kicking in that may actually smooth it out a little more. But John said there are a lot of adverse things coming down the line, and we talked about that at the Credit Service Association event last week.
Brilliant. Okay, and Adam, have you got a view on that at all?
Yeah, just in terms of the cost of business transformation, I think you just need to think about what transformation means. I mean, for me, it's having a very clear strategic plan, and which ultimately transforms what you do today and what you want to do tomorrow. So I think it's really taking some of those things off in bite-sized chunks. As the guys are saying, we know that there are probably going to be more arrears coming through. When will that kind of come in? And it's about being prepared for some of that. And some of the changes that we make today might not necessarily be that detrimental to the business operations. So business can continue as it is today, but by running some parallel implementations of transforming what we do. So whether it's slowly introducing some of the chatbot technology, whether it's having nano sites where people can go and make payments, introducing those alongside what we do today. And again, I'll come back to the point I made earlier, making sure that the journey remains integrated, and it's not kind of chunks over here, chunks over there, and it's kind of not joined up. I think is kind of key, making sure that your consumers are engaging with you throughout on that. And I think that's probably the key one for me around that, the cost question, around whether the cost of change is too much of a risk.
Okay, and John, any expansion on? You kind of covered it a little bit.
Yeah, I guess, look, it's not a secret in the DCA sector that margins are incredibly tight and always have been. That's been caused a lot by the changes in the service we actually provide. But I guess if you look at the contingent sector, the commercials haven't followed that, and a lot of that is still commission-based. So cost is incredibly important to get right. But if I go back to what I was speaking about earlier, I do think you've got an opportunity, with the cloud solutions, software as a service now readily available in the market. You don't have to dive in anymore. There's real opportunities there to do a champion challenge. Take your time, make sure you've got it right, and go back to what we spoke about earlier. What is the customer benefit? What is the business benefit? Why are we actually doing this? How is the end user going to respond to the changes you're trying to make? And you'll only ever find that out through actually testing it. There's a lot of pre-assumptions you can make about exactly how something's going to work and about exactly how it's going to be received, but you can't guarantee that's going to happen. So, take advantage of the services you have out there you can test and learn from. Do a champion challenge, traditional 80-20 models, see how things work, and then take your time and do the incremental changes. I'm a huge believer in an agile approach. I really hate big bangs. So take your time, incremental changes, and you'll get it right.
Okay. And Mehmet, any addition to that?
Well, I think a lot has been covered, but my simple answer to this simple question is yes. Yes, the cost can easily outstrip if you just get things wrong. A lot of AI, machine learning, automation, self-serve, these are very sexy terms, but are they really being used in the right way? For machine learning to work, you need to have a full data trail, right? So behavioral trail from A to Z. If you keep breaking that, if you don't have meaningful data to work with, you can import all the best analytical tools in the world and have the best machine learning platform. It's not going to give you very good results. In self-serve, if if your self-serve environment can only take care of 30% of the functionality that you need in debt collection, it's not going to give you a lot of capacity, will it? Because everything's going to escalate back up to the agent at the end of the day, and your capacity is not going to really change. So what have you done? You've spent a lot of money implementing self-serve and machine learning and everything else, but you still have the same results because everything's going to the agent's desk, and you're not really accomplishing much. So I guess the magic there is this is repeated by everyone already. So having the right design in place, right? So you need to make sure that you have the right digital highway to feed your analytical capabilities so that you get the best result out of that. So if you're going to go implement self-serve, you need to make sure that it's for, you implement the right functionalities and you can achieve those realistically before you spend the money, and then you get the results. But if you do get the results, obviously the benefits of transformation are not even debatable, especially if you have a growing portfolio of credit or overdues. There's no scalability comparable to that.
Okay, fantastic. And I guess moving on top of that, probably more important, well, definitely important, is compliance and GDPR and its importance and impact on transformation. Kevin, do you want to take an angle on that?
Yeah, I mean, GDPR is not new, and since 2018, it's been ingrained in most people. But I think the sort of fairness by design and data protection by design have become things that now, you do so at your own peril if you don't take account of that. And I think just listening on the AI machine learning piece, the Information Commissioner has been very clear. You've got to make sure that all your decisions are explainable. And that means you've got to sort of embed this right at the heart of your agents and your digital platforms. So in whatever way you're using this, and open banking's the same to some degree, that if you're doing that in your data protection impact assessments right at the beginning when you're looking at this, something will go wrong further down the line. We heard the word earlier on, working in an agile way. I've been doing that at scale for a couple of years, but it amazes me the number of times that the non-functional bits like compliance, security get left to the end. So these need equal prominence right at the very beginning. And I have to say, working in public sector, they're not forgotten. You have an abundance of governance you have to go through, whether it be a DPIA, a BIA, a DIA, a security assessment. All of these things happen right at the very beginning, but they need to be there the whole way through the sprint processes. So when you build your backlog, you look at some of the things right at the beginning. Is this hard? We better put it at the beginning rather than leaving it to the end. So GDPR, the whole data protection area, particularly when we're dealing with what used to be sensitive personal data, special category data, it's becoming increasingly important, how it's utilized. But more importantly, when somebody volunteers that data, woe betide you if you haven't used it. So going back to the two thematic reviews my sector's been through, where you did capture a lot of the data, often it is when you've sent off thousands and thousands of files, somebody's saying, somebody disclosed that, why didn't you use it? So you can't hide behind GDPR. Now's the time to come out and say, right, we have to be very, very clear that it isn't an obstacle, but we've got to have thought about how do we use that data by design in our products. And that's really what the vulnerability guide from February this year set out. Have you thought about your communication strategies? Have you thought about your product lifecycle? And woe betide you if you can't evidence that. And there will be a little bit of retrospective work, I am sure, by the FCA with the new consumer duty, which said, show me how your thinking worked through COVID and show me how you adapted your policies down to the coalface where people aren't hiding behind the computer says no anymore.
Okay. And John, any thoughts from you on this one?
Yeah, I guess it's for me, to be honest, it's just part of your culture. It's just part of your culture. You know, we have a huge focus on treating customers fairly. So every decision you make, you're considering the fairness of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that applies the same equally to the conversations your agents are having, to the decisions you're making in terms of the technology and transformational changes you're trying to make. So compliance is just, it's embedded in the business now. It's far-reaching. It's not an afterthought anymore. Compliance is the first thing you're considering in terms of actually not anymore being a checkbox and somebody to look at what you've done, but actually to engage with early on in the process and learn from them. And they can actually help you design the right solutions that are going to benefit both the business, but make sure you're not doing anything incorrect.
Okay. Final one, this one from Adam, and then we'll try and go through some questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll put quite simply, just echoing, what John was saying there. Compliance is one of our core values, so it's part of the fabric of what we do at Phillips and Cohen anyway. It's ingrained. I think one of the challenges that we face into is what does that look and feel like on a global scale. So, what we see for consent, for example, over in the US is very different to the interpretation in the UK, but we still have the same approach and making sure we're capturing consent and we're compliant in exactly the same way. I think one of my observations, I think, as we again thinking about the theme around digital transformation, thinking about is compliance and the way that we, I guess, hold ourselves to account internally is that in line with the ambitions that we've got digitally? So in terms of how we're using the data, what do our consumers expect as well? And I think it goes beyond that further as well. And it's something that we're looking at is around tone of voice. So when we're engaging with our consumers, again in a compliant and sensitive manner, what does the actual language look and feel like as well? As we make sure that we're actually compliant in all elements there as well. But I think there's part of that probably needs to evolve in time as well as we engage with people more online and via mobile.
Okay, right. Any additions, Mehmet, or should I come to you on the next
one? Just very briefly, I think so. Our approach at Ceverine is maximum automation and maximum digital, and the reason for that is if you have that, it's easy to translate compliance policies to reality, right? So if you're running a true omni-channel operation, then the difficulty is obvious. So that's all I'm going to ask.
Oh, no, that's brilliant.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's great. So we've had one question come in that I've picked out. So do the costs of business transformation sometimes outstrip the risks of business disruption? Anybody feel comfortable about answering that one, or? Okay.
So I think we've probably covered that in part, Colin.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. There's quite a few questions coming in.
Just myself and the guys just thinking about that. At a time, control environment.
No, that's all right. That's cool. Okay,
Colin. The one thing I would say, I mean, again, probably familiar to many people within the FCA space at the moment, it does feel like there's an awful lot of imposed regulation which going on concurrently with the pandemic, along with your own business transformation plans, can be quite tricky to actually align. It's difficult then to stay ahead of the game constantly. Again, a lot of my members are small and medium-sized firms, and a medium-sized firm here can often be well under sort of 20 million turnover, and a lot of the smaller firms sub 1 million. So it can feel like the regulatory risk can actually impose a lot of burden, and you do have to have a lot of foresight to try and align that and said, I've taken that, embraced it, and I put it as part of my forward look. So that does feel a lot of things that are sucking up a lot of time, and the FCA have been as I said, very hard on financial resilience now. And there's been a lot of thought around prudential resources. And for the smaller firms, that's quite a tough call in terms of the assets they need just to run in this space.
Okay, that's cool. I'm conscious of time, so I just want to have a quick prediction roundup, crystal ball moment from all of you around collections technology and business transformation, and I don't know, a timescale. I've said 3 years in the last one, but it'd be good to get all of your views on that, really. Any thoughts on that? John, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I guess I'd hate to sound like a broken record, but I think we're just going to see more and more uptake of cloud-based solutions.
Okay.
A lot more people challenging what they have. I think you're going to see more change than we've ever seen before. I think there's great opportunities if you are trying to focus on AI and machine learning. Then if you're looking at the capabilities of things like your chatbot and improvements in their triage style capabilities, I think there's a real opportunity there. I also think there's real opportunity in your voice analytics space in terms of the live environment, particularly in terms of live nudges to your agents. If we're looking at vulnerability in particular, there's definitely trigger phrases in there, trigger opportunities that, with the best will in the world, with the most skilled and experienced staff member, those can sometimes be missed. So with those sort of capabilities, you potentially get the chance to stop customer detriment at the outset, or even, if you're looking at post the event, capture it and then have an opportunity to resolve it. So there's a lot to cover, Colin, to be honest.
No worries. Mehmet, do you want to any predictions?
Any predictions for the
collections? Yeah, and
I mean, I think
being a new place to the market, in effect.
Well, I mean, my overall prediction is as things become more digital, I think we'll have more automation. I think regulators will. Currently, I think the biggest challenge there is compliance. For instance, I&E automation of I&E is a big challenge, right? So once if you can't have that one piece working, it disrupts the whole thing. But I think regulators will sort of will slowly support digital and automation a little more than they are right now, or so they'll sync up at least, and we'll have better data to play with and better digital highways to play with, and I think we'll have much more automation going forward and lower costs, and so it's a lot of Ceverine type propositions out there.
And Adam?
Yeah, I've come at a slightly different angle rather than the technology side of things. I think that's kind of a given that the technology is going to continually develop. And I was in a conversation recently that almost the technology is developing at such a pace now, the consumer world's not quite keeping up with that pace. It's actually outstripping the demand and what people are actually wanting in terms of some of the artificial intelligence that's out there. And I think on one of the earlier calls, someone was even mentioned around golf clubs, weren't they, Colin? Around
yeah.
So it's kind of, do I really need that? But I think the technology will continue to go. I think the key thing for me is that in collections, there's still like that reliance on some of those traditional methods, both from the consumer side, but also from organisations. And I don't think that will ever go. I think we'll always have a voice function. We'll always use letters in some form, etc., etc. There'll always be a place. And I'm a big advocate of creating additional channels, not necessarily replacing them. I think there'll always be a need for some of those channels. And I think the shift will change, and it is changing now to more digital. We've seen that. That's been exacerbated by the pandemic. But I think the real prediction for me is that I think that change now is really going to fly. I think that we're going to see that people have made that shift over the last couple of years. And I think that expectation now for truly digitized journeys within that collections and recoveries area is going to be a minimum requirement. And when we talk about omni-channel, people have to dip in and out. I think we need to be on our A game for that. And to put that into context, I was kind of thinking about something earlier around debit cards. So, we know that 2/3 of debit card payments now are done via contactless. So you're pay and go, tap and go technology. That only came in 2007, where the floor limit, I think, was around a tenner. And we've seen that increase over the years. And that's going to increase again next month to £100. For me, that's one thing. That's acceptance. That's people being more comfortable to use that. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think that's going to be the biggest change within collections, where there's going to be a real shift to digital. So again, this topic here around transformation is incredibly important, because all of us on this call and people listening, representing organisations, need to be absolutely sure we're on our A game to make sure we're ready to accommodate that.
No worries. I think we're running really short on time. I wanted to get your view though, Kevin. Hopefully the system.
I'd probably give I obviously did my opinion blog, so I'll point people to read that my top 10.
Brilliant.
But the one I would say more than anything else, from coming through from pandemic, when telephone systems went down, we had to put a huge number of people on the new web chat platform. So aligning the right skills to the right people to me is critical, and doing that in an omni-channel view, so that a lot of your collectors can work on the telephone in a conversational UI web chat environment without any difficulty in transitioning, because the fact is most of those consumers didn't substitute and switch channel, they use both. And the end result is all the analysis we looked at for cost saving on self-serve, the client ended up just taking it and adding it into their toolkit and said, I want to use that, and that, but I will still use the telephone for this type of call. My tax code I might be able to do online, but for this type of thing, I'll use chat. And I think we've got to get involved in that. So putting the right skills in your collections workforce, your debt advice workforce, into work is going to be key. So understanding that people will use mixed journeys.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kevin. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. So, just wanted to round up really, and just say thank you, obviously, to our panelists for all their views there. That was really interesting and fantastic. Good to get their views. And obviously, thank everybody who's contributed today to our polls, etc. Hopefully, you've all taken a lot across from all of the discussions, not just this one, if you managed to tune in. Big thank you to all of our sponsors today. Call Miner did something earlier, PayLink Solutions, Webio, Affiliates, and Ceverine for their support in making the event possible. Really good. And of course, not only the 4 speakers here, but all our speakers across the day have been brilliant. So really big thanks to them on that. Just wanted to flag up that we're not done with Credit Connect with events this year at all. A bit of a plug time, sorry about this, but we've got a lending technology think tank coming up on just under 4 weeks' time on Tuesday, the 12th of October. Details in the resources tab. Have a quick look at that. Hopefully we can get, if people are interested in that angle, then good for them. That'd be great to have them on board. And then also we've got, pleased to announce, we've got our Credit and Collections Technology Think Tank face-to-face, which we're all in shock about potentially, on the 4th of November at the Midland Hotel in Manchester. So if people want to join us from that, we're getting our speakers recruited for that one. And we've got the Credit and Collections Technology Awards in the day. So hopefully there's a couple of reasons for people to go along from a networking perspective as well. But I think we'll finish up now. We've run over time. Sorry about that. It would be brilliant to get your feedback on this event. So we've sent set some surveys with that in mind. So hopefully you complete that. But for now, I'd like to round up and say a big thank you from myself. Big thanks to John, Kevin, Adam, and Mehmet and Phillips for supporting this event. And we'll hopefully see you all again soon. We'll announce some more online events for 2022. But now we're all going to say goodbye. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.